We all know that Phineas and Ferb have 104 days of summer vacation and a lot of things to do in them, mostly building out-of-this-world inventions and making Candace look like a liar in front of their parents. But what if I told you that Phineas and Ferb never actually existed, and that all of those inventions and adventures were just in Candace's mind? Phineas and Ferb is one of those shows with a pretty consistent episode structure. You know that every episode will involve Phineas and Ferb embarking on some big idea while Dr. Doofenshmirtz tries to destroy the world somehow.
Accidents can happen.
And the whole time, Candace will tell her mom what's going on, and she will be ignored because the kids are good boys. But what if Candace's mom is right? What if the kids really are just good kids, and they're not actually doing any of the things that Candace claims they are? What if they just don't exist? Or more specifically, what if only one exists? The theory suggests that Phineas died in some horrific childhood incident likely caused by one of his own creations. Ferb was so traumatized by the whole thing that he ended up becoming mute, while Candace's trauma became entirely psychological, inventing a new version of Phineas in her mind. Now, I know this kind of doesn't make sense right away. I mean, Phineas and Ferb have a ton of friends, and the stuff they're making is pretty obviously real because everyone is reacting to it. Don't worry, I'll talk about that later. But for now, let's take a look at some of the evidence. In the Season 1 episode, The Fast and the Phineas and Ferb decide to upgrade their mom's car, turning it into a race car to win a big car race, despite not being old enough or even knowing how to drive a car. When Candace finds out, she realizes it's a great opportunity to get them busted. But every time Candace tries to get her mom to pay attention, something goes wrong. Phineas and Ferb blast their car into the sky like a rocket. The TV plays a dandruff shampoo commercial instead of the race coverage. Eventually, a photographer takes a photo of Candace looking pretty rough, which gives her the idea to take a photo of Phineas to bust him. But she doesn't have enough money to buy both, so she gives one back, which the photographer rips up and heads home. Candace rushes to show her mom the photo, but of course, she took the wrong one. It's the photo of her looking awful, covered in dust. But she has hope, realizing that the race is being televised. She puts the television on, catching the moment Phineas wins the race, but just before her mom comes over, Doofenshmirtz crashes his blimp into the TV tower, shutting down the broadcast. Realizing that the car is still missing from the garage, Candace decides this is the final piece of evidence she needs. When she brings her mom to look, her mom is naturally shocked by what she sees. The kids have washed her car. The car is back in the garage with Phineas and Ferb passing by behind with their giant trophy. This happens in basically every episode. Phineas and Ferb run rings around Candace, and every time she gets even close to getting her mom to see what they're doing, they manage to wipe everything clean and act as though nothing ever happened, making her look completely insane and delusional, and convincing her mom that Candace is just, as always, overreacting to something sweet or cute the kids did. The fact that this happens so often suggests to me that something is going on. Their mom is never all that concerned about Candace's mental health, despite the fact that she's constantly screaming about things that, to her mother, don't happen. It kind of suggests that their mother has come to terms with the death of her son, or has maybe even just entered into a fantasy world of her own where everything is totally fine all the time. Honestly, I think this whole family is just a little bit unhinged. I know that's a pretty big swing when we're talking about a family who have a pet platypus, but what about the incidents where the kids don't destroy the invention or cover up their messes? Or even more interestingly, when Phineas and Ferb just openly agree with Candace and say that they did it. The episode Traffic Cam Caper opens with a scene of the family at the dinner table where Candace tries to convince her parents that Phineas and Ferb flew off to outer space. But as always, Mom doesn't believe it. However, Phineas and Ferb confirm that they did do that, and they brought moon rocks home to prove it. And yet, even with this concrete proof, their mom just kind of brushes the whole thing off, encouraging Candace to use her imagination more often, which is kind of a weird thing to say, given that we're talking about how Phineas is literally a figment of Candace's imagination. But this whole scene really just highlights the fact that nothing Candace says registers with her mom whatsoever. It's almost like they're having two completely different conversations, as if the boys can do no wrong. There's just no way that Candace can win because her mom will always dismiss her. Like I said, their mom seems to be in her own world most of the time, completely unaware of anything going on around her and never really having any emotional changes. She's extremely stable and seems to be coping with life just fine. So I don't think it's impossible to think that she's probably just come to the idea that this is the best way to deal with her slightly unhinged, emotionally distraught daughter. I mean, if I really wanted to, I could argue that even their mom is just imagining Phineas in the way she remembered him too, as a good kid who never did anything wrong. But, let's focus on Candace, right? Honestly, I think it could also be said that maybe her mom is doing a really compassionate thing for her daughter. I mean, if she's emotionally struggling to cope with the loss of her brother, maybe her mom being so stoic and calm about everything is a good thing. After all, if she was freaking out and panicking, it probably wouldn't be any comfort to Candace, who is clearly hallucinating. If anything, it might make her spiral even further out of control. Speaking of hallucinations, let's talk about Perry the Platypus. Throughout the entirety of the show, Candace is one of the few characters to actually encounter Perry in his secret agent persona. On 4 separate occasions, she's caught him in the act, and every time she convinces herself that she's hallucinated the entire thing. What's really interesting about this is that it suggests Candace has a degree of self-awareness about the world around her. She knows when something is strange or unusual, which only makes it more bizarre that she never really stops to question her brother's ridiculous antics. Because surely, if you find a secret agent platypus unusual, you'd also find it strange that your brothers are currently blasting off into outer space to collect rocks, or building an entire diner on the top of the family RV. But Candace never really questions any of that stuff. She's more focused on getting her mom to pay attention to all of it than ever stopping to question why or how they're actually making this stuff happen. It kind of suggests that she's inventing those things. She knew Phineas enough to know exactly what he liked to do and his insane ambitions, and now she's creating opportunities in her mind for him to do all of those things without having to stop and wait for permission or other people. And because Ferb was his bestie, of course he would go along with the whole thing. In fact, Ferb's silence might go beyond his simple mute trauma. We know from the premise of the show that Ferb is Candace's stepbrother, so they aren't blood relatives. And in fact, Candace never really runs to her stepdad to complain about Phineas either. It's always to her mother. So why is it that she seems determined to avoid the non-blood relatives in all of this? I think it's just part of her trauma. She doesn't blame Ferb for whatever happened to her brother, so she doesn't want to put any words in his mouth or make him seem responsible for the tragedy that damaged the family forever. And as for her stepdad, he seems like such a nice, reasonable guy that she wouldn't want to burden him with any complaints or concerns either. So her poor mother gets the brunt of the emotional trauma, forced to entertain her daughter's invented fantasy world without losing her own mind in the process. Okay, so we know why Ferb doesn't speak, but now we have to address that other problem. I'm sure you're dead. How does everyone else interact with him? Great question. One of the final episodes of the show, Act Your Age, follows the characters 10 years in the future. We see Phineas and Ferb facing the challenges of choosing a college to go to, but the episode doesn't have Candace in it at all. The reason given is that Candace has apparently decided to go to law school, presumably to get well-versed in evidence and other methods of capturing or catching Phineas doing something bad. But in the case of our theory, I think you could agree that this whole episode is something completely different. This is Candace's imagination working to envision what Phineas's future would be. In the episode, Phineas is working through the kinds of things that many other people in their late teens work through. He's finally addressing his sort of relationship with Isabella. He's preparing to go to college. He's moving on with his life in a way he never really showed any interest in doing before. And I think you could agree that this is just the kind of future she wishes Phineas could have had if he lived. But now, after years and years of psychologically trying to protect him in a fictionalized version of her world, she's finally ready to let him go and allow him to exist in the world on his own terms. In her mind, of course. But it really does seem like she no longer has this need to chase him around and catch him doing something dangerous or reckless. She just lets him go and live the way he wants to live. It's kind of sweet in a totally made-up way. Anyway, I think this can be expanded over the whole series. There are plenty of episodes and moments where Candace is nowhere near Phineas or his adventures, but he still has a bunch of people to interact with. So I think you could easily argue that she's just imagining his adventures and the antics he would have with his buddies. And then, like I said earlier, all of the Doofenshmirtz and Perry antics are basically like a little side plot her brain has invented because she's kind of unraveling from reality.
Got you, Perry the Platypus!
I think it's easy to paint Candace as a two-dimensional villain character since her whole existence revolves around getting her brothers into trouble, but I think there's something more interesting when we look at her through this lens. I think deep down, Candace really does care about Phineas and Ferb, no matter how hard she tries to frame it otherwise. There's just no real advantage for her getting them in trouble beyond watching them get yelled at. But when you add in the idea that Phineas died somehow in one of his adventures, it takes on a new meaning. Now, it's a story about Candace trying in her head to save her brother that she lost, and I think that completely changes her character for the better. Or maybe it's just a cartoon about two goofy kids who build awesome devices and outsmart their sister. I don't know, man. I just like cartoons.